why Manchester City must let go of Kevin De Bruyne. Hey everyone, it's FBB. There are some videos that truly break my heart, and honestly, I feel like a kid right now making a video about why I have to let go of my favorite comfort toy. Because yes, Kevin De Bruyne at Manchester City is pure football love. For the past 10 years, he has been the heartbeat of the citizens, dictating the rhythm of the Premier League, delivering world-class seasons, and making us want to turn on our TVs just to watch him play. Since I can't be in the stadiums in England, I've been enjoying Manchester City's matches from my screen, and I've lost count of the number of times I've sat there thinking, my God, Kevin De Bruyne, what a phenomenal footballer. He's different from the rest of those rare players who see things others don't. His technical brilliance, combined with a vision that humbles us as mere football spectators, reminds us that we will never truly grasp the game like these geniuses do. But the harsh truth is that no one is eternal, except maybe Kate Moss, as Stromae would say, and Kevin De Bruyne is no exception. In my opinion, the time has come for Manchester City and De Bruyne to part ways. And today, we're going to talk about why. Welcome to this new video. His declining importance at Manchester City. Let's set the scene. Kevin De Bruyne is currently 33 years old and will turn 34 during the upcoming summer transfer window. That means he's a player with a lot of mileage on his legs. This season, he has played around 1,500 minutes, scoring 3 goals and providing 6 assists. To put that into perspective, that's only 41% of the possible minutes, and he has spent 37% of the time on the bench. What this tells us is that Kevin De Bruyne is no longer a central figure in Manchester City's lineup this season, and it's not because of a long-term injury that kept him out for 6 months. Now, there have been plenty of games where Pep Guardiola has simply chosen to leave him on the bench. Of course, there was an injury, I'll show it on screen, but we can see that De Bruyne's physical fragility is growing. The hamstring injury he suffered at the beginning of last season was a major setback, but this year, he has only missed a month and a half of competition. That absence affected his form, meaning he couldn't just return and immediately play 90 minutes every match. However, there have also been tactical choices where Guardiola deliberately decided to leave him out. Looking at City's squad and the minutes played, De Bruyne is far from the top. Players like Savinho, Bernardo Silva, Ilkay Gundogan last season, and even Phil Foden have more game time than him. And this situation is only going to get more difficult for De Bruyne moving forward. Rodri's return to midfield will further complicate things, not because Rodri and De Bruyne play the same role, but because it affects the overall midfield structure. Then, in the winter transfer window, City signed Omar Marmoush, who, while not a direct replacement for De Bruyne, further reduces the available spots in the attack. Marmoush isn't here to sit on the bench, and with City needing to balance their squad, De Bruyne's position becomes even more fragile. And let's not forget at the start of this season, Marmoush wasn't even in the squad, Rodri hadn't returned yet, and there wasn't a young star pushing De Bruyne out of the lineup. Sometimes in football, a generational talent emerges and takes over, forcing the older player out. But that's not the case here. Yes, Foden is improving, but there were still minutes available for De Bruyne. Just look at Bernardo Silva has played almost 3,000 minutes this season. And if we're talking about fatigue, Bernardo is just as physically drained as De Bruyne. Even Grealish and Doku have struggled for minutes. In a City team that hasn't been at its best this season, if De Bruyne were in top form, he would have had a clear path to playing nearly every match, but Guardiola's choices suggest otherwise. Of course, Pep's decisions are debatable, especially given the criticism he's been facing lately. But we also have to consider the physical side of things. Let's bring back the injury record. While De Bruyne hasn't missed 3 months of football this season, he is still getting injured more frequently. His body is starting to struggle with the intensity of the game. We'll dive deeper into how this has affected his performances. But before we even get into his contract situation, which is a key part of this discussion, it's clear that this is far from De Bruyne's best season. And to be honest, last season was already complicated due to injuries. So now the question is, how does this all translate on the pitch? What's disappointing about De Bruyne every week? If Pep Guardiola is choosing to play Kevin De Bruyne less, there has to be a reason he simply isn't performing at the same level anymore. Let's start with his offensive contribution, purely from a statistical perspective. The Belgian is clearly not having his best season. He has always been known for exceeding his expected goals, XG, scoring difficult and spectacular goals with ease. But this season, he has come back, down to earth. His finishing is not as clinical, and as a result, his goal tally has taken a hit. Now, if it were just about his goal scoring, it wouldn't be a big deal. When I've talked about how much Kevin De Bruyne made me love football, it was never just because of his goals. But the real issue is that even in open play, things are more complicated than before. We're seeing a less explosive version of De Bruyne. His ability to carry the ball forward and break lines has noticeably declined. Of course, he still has his technical quality and vision, but in a Manchester City team that isn't playing at its best, it's harder for those qualities to shine. And what do we see as a result? Fewer runs, less offensive impact, and a weaker presence off the ball. Now, let's be clear, De Bruyne was never the kind of player who dominated with pure athleticism, but this season, his physical decline is undeniable. I won't bore you by listing all his dual stats, because honestly, they don't make for pretty reading. But the drop-off is obvious when you watch him play. Since his injuries, De Bruyne is no longer the same physical force he used to be. I called Bernardo Silva burned out earlier, and maybe that was a bit harsh. But when I watch De Bruyne this season, I can't help but feel the same way. His talent will never fade, but physically, he isn't the same player anymore. Less activity, less explosiveness, less sharpness in the final third. And in a Manchester City side that has been struggling, that's all it takes for a once unstoppable magician to start looking like a shadow of himself. Now, does that mean De Bruyne has no place at Manchester City anymore? Not necessarily. He still has magic in his boots. And some might argue that City's poor form is dragging him down rather than the other way around. Maybe things will improve next season. But here's the reality. De Bruyne is getting older. The timing of this discussion is no coincidence. There's an elephant in the room, and it's his contract expiring in 2025. Is this the perfect time to move on? Kevin De Bruyne no longer holds the same place in Manchester City's squad as he once did. His performances have dipped, and while he might improve, he will never return to his peak years. That golden period is gone. At this stage, a salary reduction would be inevitable. But right now, negotiations between Manchester City and De Bruyne are at a standstill, with some tension in the air. So, when you step back and look at the bigger picture, Manchester City is struggling and needs to refresh the squad. Guardiola's future is uncertain. De Bruyne is aging, dealing with injuries, and in the final year of his contract, are the stars aligning for a new chapter? That's the question I've been asking myself, and it's why I made this video. Maybe now is the right moment for City and De Bruyne to part ways. City isn't going to keep paying a massive salary to a player whose best days are behind him. Squad renewal is painful, and sometimes it means saying goodbye to club legends. And let's be honest, De Bruyne is one of the biggest legends in Manchester City's history. I hate to say it because it feels surreal to think that this incredible decade of De Bruyne at City is coming to an end. But when I see his injury record and the fact that he's turning 34 soon, I start to wonder, maybe it's time for him to chase one last big payday in MLS or Saudi Arabia. Maybe it's time for a new challenge, one that's a little less intense. One thing is certain, Kevin De Bruyne and Manchester City had an absolutely beautiful story, but maybe it's time for it to end. And if he leaves now, he could still walk out through the front door as a club legend. Stay too long, and that exit might not be as glorious. Let me know what you think in the comments. Should City let him go, or does he still have one more season left in him? See you in the next video. Take care.